Hey Maximizers, this is Kevin from MaximizingEcommerce.com, and I help people start and grow e-commerce businesses. In this particular video, we're going to talk about the fact that in order to sell a product, you have to have a product to sell. And we're going to talk through 4 different methods of sourcing for products. So let's get right into it. First off, one of the options is oftentimes referred to as arbitrage, which could be in the sense of retail arbitrage or online arbitrage, which is essentially you go to, let's say, a store or an online store or a physical store like a Walmart, for example. You buy something at a low price to sell at a higher price. That's essentially what arbitrage is. And what you're doing is going out, finding deals, which oftentimes are one-time deals, and then selling them at a profit. It's a great way to get started in the business. So I want to walk through some of the pros and cons of that. So some of the pros of the arbitrage model, whether it be online or retail again, it's got a very good low cost of entry. So if you don't have a lot of funds to get started, it's a great way to get your feet wet, just to see how things sell online, get some experience, so to speak. And as I said, it is a great way to get started. It is actually how I made my first sale, was doing the arbitrage model. And I'll tell you, there's just something in your mind clicks when you've had that first sale. And it is a great way of the mechanics, or at least selling. Let me take that back again. It is a great way of learning the mechanics of selling online. So for example, like let's say you are selling on Amazon. There's all these little moving pieces you got to learn, like how they want the barcode labels on the products, how they want certain things, that there's certain things you can sell and certain things you can't sell. And it's a great way of learning that, is getting out there and doing the arbitrage model. Now, there are some cons to it. So for one, the margins can be relatively low. There's oftentimes a phrase called the race to the bottom. So as more people are selling the same product, everybody's competing to get that buy box in Amazon, for example, or even if it's eBay, if you're selling against other listings that are the same product. I mean, people are going to gravitate, if it's apples to apples, the exact same product, people are going to go for the lowest price, oftentimes. So everyone's lowering their price to just one up each other, or I guess more to say one down each other. And of course that cuts into margins. And because oftentimes it's pretty easy to get into the arbitrage model, there's a lot of people doing it. So as much as that shouldn't be something that gets in your way to at least get started, but just keep in mind if that's what you want to do as a long-term model, that can also be very time consuming. So it's not always necessarily sustainable, because it can be a lot of constant sourcing, going out and finding new products. And the reason I included that picture there on the right side of the screen with the hamster wheel is sometimes it's described as that because you're having to do what they call feed the beast. You're constantly going out and finding new product. You don't own any of the brands, but you're just going out and finding deals and reselling them. I mean, it's a great way, again, to cut your teeth and get started in the e-commerce business, but it's like being on the hamster wheel. You're constantly finding new products, to sell. Now, then there's called wholesaling. Wholesaling is you have a relationship with a factory or a distributor, somebody else that owns the brand, and you're buying from them to sell on your own website or to sell on Amazon or eBay or wherever it is you're selling it. And if you go to the grocery store, you go to a brick and mortar store, typically they're working in a wholesale model where they're getting from some wholesaler. They're buying a product. So there's some good pros and cons of the wholesale model. So let's walk through those. So the pros of the wholesale model is there's still relatively low cost of entry. Some might argue that point, but if you can get relatively low minimum order quantities relative to having your own branded product, because they're the ones, the wholesaler, the distributor, who are selling you the products, they're the ones that have taken on the risk by buying larger orders from a factory, or producing that larger order. So what they're doing is they're selling you smaller quantities of whatever that production run was, and then you're turning around and selling it. So you're basically becoming a middleman, so to speak. And the nice part about the wholesale model is that you can develop some momentum because you're not constantly going out and finding a new product, because you're just reordering the same product over and over again. So as you see it moving, you just order appropriately. And some of the cons of the wholesale model are the margins can be lower than having your own product, because you're essentially the middleman. So every step in that process, as someone else is selling the product, it cuts into the overall margin, because it's not like the customer is going to, for the same product, going to pay more just because there's a middleman. I mean, sometimes they're kind of forced to in some ways, one might argue, but generally speaking, there's a pie, if you think of it that way. So whatever margins there are, like a pie, and everyone's kind of taking their own little piece of that pie. So if more people that are steps in the process that are selling it, the more cut into that pie is, which means there's less for you as the seller. You don't get exclusivity, generally speaking, in a wholesale deal. So like, for example, if you're selling a wholesale product that you bought wholesale on Amazon, you're probably not the only person selling it. And that's because you don't own the brand. So unless you have an exclusive deal, which can be hard to get, it's not impossible, but it can be hard to get, because if you're buying wholesale and you're not buying large quantities, so unless like you're an exclusive distributor, chances are you're going to be competing with others for that buy box. There's kind of also that race to the bottom, as I was saying before with the arbitrage model. And because you don't own the brand, you could be cut out too of the wholesale. Like they could just start saying, well, we just want to sell direct, or whatever the case is. Whoever it is, your supplier might say that. So then it could be time consuming developing relationships with your supplier. So that's kind of some of the cons of the wholesale world, is that sometimes it's hard to just call up a factory and say, hey, I want to buy 30 of your widgets, or I want to buy 7 cases, or whatever the case is. It can be a little difficult to do that, especially if they don't know you and haven't developed a trust for you, because you're essentially going to be representing their brand. And they may be concerned about, who it is that you're selling to and all the crazy stuff. So that's where the relationship piece does come into play with the wholesale model. And then also some channels are very particular who sells certain brands. And that's the same thing with arbitrage too. And so like, for example, Amazon, like you can't just go in and sell Frozen merchandise, the movie Frozen. There's a lot of different brands that don't allow people to sell their brand. So unless you have brand authorization, which is more really, I guess, a concern for arbitrage model, but it is a concern for wholesale, that maybe you're even able to sell it, but Amazon doesn't want you to sell that particular brand for whatever the case is. So, just keep that in mind. Make sure you have the ability to sell on whatever channel it is you're looking to sell on, if you are buying wholesale, because anytime you don't own the brand, you also don't own the experience of where it gets sold. Then there's what's called private label. So private label, sometimes referred to as white label, where you take a product and you basically put your logo on it. You might make some small modifications to it, but now you're talking about you're actually owning a brand. And you might be saying like, well, but does that happen a lot, that people white label or private label a product? So basically it's, again, like a factory has an existing product and you're making minimal modifications, possibly just with the packaging or things of that nature. You haven't completely changed up the design of a product. So it's kind of an off-the-shelf type thing. And I'll tell you this, the private label model is very common. So especially like if you go to, and I'll use grocery stores as an example here. If you go to a grocery store, there are, like, let's say you have cornflakes. You might have Kellogg's cornflake, very well-known brand. Then right next to it, you might have, it might even still be called cornflakes, and it might be XYZ grocery chain brand. Well, chances are you could go down the street to another grocery store and they might be coming from the same factory, might be making 2 different companies private labeled cornflakes, for example, and they might be coming off the same line, the exact same product, just put it in a different box. And one thing I thought was really interesting one time is I went on a tour of a milk distributor in the Orlando area, and they were describing that they literally had 14 different stores in the area, pretty much all but one of the major grocery stores that they provided the milk for. Now, they also had their own branded milk, and there was really no difference between their branded milk and the store brand, even though the store brand might have been a little less expensive. It literally was the same milk that came in. Like, they made the way they were explaining it was they didn't make any differentiation between the milk that came in. And it wasn't like they said, okay, this milk goes for this company, this milk goes for that company. It's just whoever was in their production run at that time, that's what bottle they filled. So it was like literally it was the exact same milk, the exact same quality standards, everything. So private label is very common out there. So if you're looking to do your own branded product, it's a great way to get started. So some of the pros and cons of private label would be you do get a chance to build a brand, and you could end up trademarking that brand. You could do all kinds of stuff, and having your own brand gives you a lot more control and the experience of that particular product. You do have higher margins and higher potential upside than say you would if you didn't control the brand, because there's less, as I was talking before about cutting into that margin pie. If you're the only one that's purchasing from the factory directly, and then you're selling to the consumer, and there's not like another middle person, so to speak, which oftentimes can be with wholesale, you have a lot more potential upside. And because you build that brand, you can keep selling that same product over and over again once you get it successful. And then one of the nice things is with the private label model is that there's a lot of information already out there. So you can see similar type products. So if you wanted to sell French press coffee maker, for example, on Amazon, you could look out there and see what is the market information, how much are they selling, and you can see for similar type products what it's selling because it's already out there. And the nice thing is you do have the ability to do some customization, not necessarily always a lot, but like if you saw that people were complaining about on Amazon, for example, when you looked up French press coffee makers, that people constantly were talking about the handle. Well, maybe that you could work with a supplier to have a better handle, whatever it was that the customers were looking for. And that's one of the nice things about private label is that you can make little tweaks here and there. And the factories oftentimes will work with you to do those types of things. And also you can improve your product over time. So as much as you can go out there and find out what information the market is saying, so what people are saying like in the comments on Amazon, which is a great place to start even if you're not going to sell the product on Amazon, because you can at least see what people are saying. I'll tell you this, my first product, I think I've made 5 iterations of some sort, whether I changed something on the packaging or I changed something on the product, based on feedback I had gotten from customers. So over time, I've improved it and made little changes, because you'll never get it exactly perfect, especially when you first start out. You learn a lot by just getting a product to the market and seeing what people have to say, because the best feedback is coming from someone who just spent their money on it. And that's the nice thing about private label. It's very easy to get it up and running, relatively speaking, compared to what we'll talk about here next. Now, the cons of private label are you don't necessarily have full control over the product. So someone else could be selling the same type of product fairly easily, might even still be coming from the same factory, same quality standards, it looks exactly the same. So you got to have some way of differentiating it. And sometimes it can be a little harder with the private label model. Which means there could be more possibility for knockoffs, sometimes referred to as Me Too products. So sometimes people will see, oh, French press coffee maker is making a lot, and somebody will find the supplier that you're working with and all of a sudden there's 10 other people selling the exact same product, especially if you didn't make any modifications to it, or someone else figures out what those modifications are, then all of a sudden everyone's making the same ones because you didn't own that brand and didn't or control the molds of the product. There could be knockoffs, but I wouldn't worry too much about that to get started, but that is a potential con, just to be fully upfront with you about the good and the bad. Typically, you have higher upfront costs than with arbitrage or wholesale, because oftentimes you may have to have a minimum order quantity of 500 or 1,000 units just to get the factory to even talk to you. Now, inventing a product is going to be the next way. So inventing a product is kind of when you think about entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, or you think about Thomas Edison, people that have throughout history created new products and brought them to the market. It's the most romanticized way of being an entrepreneur, that they go into their cave and they come out with, hello world, here's this product, almost as if it just happens and everything's wonderful after that. And there is a lot of glory in it. Now, the pros of inventing a product are that you have high risk, but you also have high reward. So if you invent the right product, you could be a billionaire. But there's that high risk part there. You have the satisfaction of your ideas could be solving an actual problem people are having. It could be a whole new thing. Sometimes people didn't even know they needed. Like, you talk about, there's a quote from Henry Ford that if we went out and asked the market what they wanted in the beginning, they would have said a better horse and buggy, not a car. So that's how they came up with cars they were looking for, because they knew that's what people needed. Now, the nice thing is, if you invent a product, or even not so much invent a product, but you work with a designer to create molds and you have your own particular product with your own design, you have more control on not just the brand, but the product itself. Now, the cons of inventing a product are you have the most initial upfront costs, and you don't know what's going to end up happening. There's a little more complexity in starting them with private label, because the factory that you're working with, or if it's your own factory and you have to get your own equipment, but let's say it's a factory you're working with, they may not be as familiar with making that exact product. So it could take a little bit more time for them because they haven't perfected their process on that yet. And also there's just a lack of certainty in the market. I mean, you have to spend a lot of money, and this also is the upfront cost, not just in developing the product, but in marketing the product. So you invent a great product, but people don't know that it's available, or that it's even solving a product or a problem they didn't even know they had. It could be hard to get it. So inventing a product could be difficult. So as much as there's high rewards, it's especially if you're just looking to get started on Amazon, it's probably not the best way to go, because it's not like Amazon has data on a similar type product, especially if you're inventing something from scratch. Now, of these 4 different models we talked about, what's right for you? Well, it depends. I know everybody likes to have a more definite answer, but it truly does depend. And it depends on where you are at this step in the process. So my personal take would be, if you don't have experience, arbitrage is a great way to get started. I wouldn't even worry about getting profitable in the beginning. Just worry about getting a product, getting it, up online, whether it's Amazon, eBay, whatever, and just see what happens when you make a sale. I mean, I can tell you, once I had a sale made, I was hooked. I knew, wow, this is something I want to pursue. It was just something really rewarding about seeing another human being went online and purchased something that I put out there. And it was just clicked in my head like, wow, this actually does happen. Even though, I was buying things on Amazon and online for years before I ever sold something. So I knew intuitively people do it because I myself was doing it. But it's just another thing that it taught me people are actually making this happen. Then I was also getting to see the mechanics of what I needed to do, of, what barcode labels Amazon looks for, and how to ship products in, because it just made it that much simpler when I finally did end up private labeling some products. It was because I had already had a little bit more experience doing retail arbitrage. Didn't do a lot of retail arbitrage. It wasn't like I, spent years doing it, but it was just getting a couple batches of things in and seeing what sold, what didn't sell. It just helped teach me another way of looking at things. So again, my gut feeling on the best thing for people is start off with the arbitrage model because it's so simple to do. And then once you get a little bit more experience and you're a little more comfortable with it, and that could be in a month or two, it doesn't have to be a long time, then maybe do private label. Now, if you have lots of funds and you say, you know what, I have a dream of bringing XYZ widget to the world and it's going to be my invention, have at it. That's the nice thing about when you have your own business. You can do whatever works for you. But this is my personal recommendation. It's at least the path I took. It's gotten to me where I have, and it continues to be a way that I'm growing my business is by doing more and more private labels. So, So hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you did, I would ask kindly that you click the little thumbs up button, as well as click the subscribe button as well. And right next to it, there's a little notification bell. So that way we can make sure to notify you whenever we have a new video that comes up. As well as I'd love to hear your feedback and what your thoughts are, any questions you have. I do my best to read all the questions and try to respond as much as possible. You can leave that down below in the comments section. And then also, if you're looking to get started, we've got a free e-commerce course available for you. So just head on over to maximizingecommerce.com/course, and you can sign up for a free e-commerce course. It's be dripped into your email inbox, and will help you get to know what you need to know to get up and running. So thank you so much for making it all the way through this video, and I wish you all the best as you work to maximize your e-commerce journey. Take care. Bye-bye.